What's up, guys? Welcome to Movie Importance Flashback Reviews, where we take movies from the past, break them down, and tell you what you think about them. If you like what you see, of course, hit the subscribe button. Join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. So we continue our journey to No Time to Die, which is Daniel Craig's last film as James Bond, and the 60s are over. The 60s are dead. We're actually heading to the 1970s finally. We're actually heading to 1971, 2 years after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Kind of made a lot of people mad, and George Lazenby unfortunately did not come back, so they needed a new Bond. And they looked at Michael Gambon, actually, which was kind of a creative choice, but he felt he was too out of shape, just not right for the part. So they did the next best thing. They brought Sean Connery back by giving him a lot of money, $1.25 million to be exact. And this was his last chance as James Bond. This was the last time he ever filled this role in an official capacity. And it's called Diamonds Are Forever. And it brings back director Guy Hamilton for his second foray into this franchise. And it had Richard Maybaum as the writer of this movie until the Broccoli family realized that it was set in America. And they hired an American writer to kind of rewrite the project. And the writer was, of course, Tom Mankiewicz. And Tom Mankiewicz was brought in to make more of like an American idealization of this film because it's, you know, in Vegas and so on and so forth. And to be fairly honest, this movie's just not very good. It's actually pretty terrible. It's not as bad as something like that, Die Another Day or anything of that nature, but it's very campy and very cheesy, which is something that actually plagued the Bond franchise in the 70s and actually in the 80s. So it just wasn't a great time for what the Bond franchise was. And it basically sees James Bond continuing the chase after Blofeld, who is another crazy scheme with S.P.E.C.T.R.E. And this time it's basically the diamond smuggling. Diamonds are being taken and used for a particular purpose. And we have these two characters who are named Mr. Kidd and Mr. Wet, who are played by Putter Smith and Bruce Glover. Bruce Glover, of course, is Crispin Glover's dad. And they are being used to basically take all these diamonds, but in the process, they are being used to kill the people that they're taking the diamonds from, so there's no trace of these diamonds being taken. Well, after everything is said and done, MI6 basically tasked James Bond to go to America to find out why these diamonds are being smuggled and who is smuggling them. So in the process of James Bond trying to figure out who's stealing all these diamonds, he meets a character named Tiffany Case, who is played by Jill St. John, and she is the Bond girl of this film. He becomes his counterpart, and he calls himself Peter Frank, and he is looking for diamonds to sell and so on and so forth. Well, in the process of all that, the real Peter Frank or whatever his name is going to see Tiffany Case. So James Bond has to go and kill the guy. Once he kills Peter Frank, he actually takes his ID and swaps it so that, you know, Tiffany Case thinks that he's James Bond, or thinks the guy is dead as James Bond. So they transport the diamonds overseas to this body that's being claimed as James Bond. And that's where everything starts to become set in motion in the Vegas scenario, where James Bond uses the dead body to extract the diamonds. We actually see Sid Haig in this movie as one of the crematorium people, which is kind of funny because unfortunately he did pass away recently. And he basically is once again confronted by Mr. Kidd and Mr. Went, who knock him out and put him in a casket. One of the caskets is going to be burned. Well, he's rescued because the diamonds are fake, and the diamonds are actually not, they're being held by, you know, Alex Leiter and so on and so forth, Felix Leiter. And he basically ends up at the White House, where he meets a character named Plenty O'Toole, who is a gold digger. She has a very small part, kind of like an integral part. And he basically uses her, and he takes her up to the room, and they kind of start having their little affair. And she gets knocked out the window by Tiffany Case's goons. That's a very uncomfortable scene to watch, because not only does she get kicked out of the window, but she falls in a pool, thank God. But the guy who pushed her out says, "I didn't even know there was a pool out there." I'm like, okay. So this movie is pretty violent from the get-go. There's many violent scenes in this. Because Tiffany Case is who she is, she actually tries to con James Bond out of his diamonds. And she ends up at the house where O'Toole is staying, and O'Toole has been murdered by, of course, Went and Kidd. And she basically, instead of screwing over James Bond, she actually goes with him. And they end up back at the White House. They have their emotional affair, romance, or whatever you want to call. And at that point, she convinces James Bond to go, or they convince each other to basically go to White's facility, which is on a government base. And there's some really interesting monologue back and forth. And, James Bond is talking to one of the scientists, the main scientist in this movie. And they figure out that he's like, in there for no reason and he shouldn't be there. So they go chasing after him. And there's this really goofy sequence where James Bond takes this like really goofy looking moon buggy. And he basically is being chased by the security, the defense, the army guards or whatever of this facility. And it's just a really over the top, really stupid sequence that doesn't make any sense, and it's just really of its time, and I don't like it at all. But we get into another sequence where James Bond basically he goes back to the White House and he scales up the side of the building to talk to this white guy, this Willard White. And basically at the beginning of this movie there is this sequence where James Bond takes and he thinks he kills Blofeld because Blofeld is using an idea of basically creating doubles of himself. So he gets up into White's room, his office or whatever, and he realized Blofeld was never actually killed. It was just another double. And there are two Blofelds. So Blofeld convinces James Bond that the one that the cat is attached to or attracted to is the real Blofeld, but he kills another double. So he's basically pushed out of the room and he gets knocked out with gas and he ends up in a pipe of some sort in the middle of the desert. But this pipe is being laid into a kind of tunnel system for this mechanical robot that's being used for, updated machinery and stuff like that. But the fact that the crew never realized that Bond's in this pipe that's literally visible to everyone because it's not actually laid yet, I don't get I'm starting to go, what am I watching? I'm like, this is so frustrating. And then it leads to another sequence where, James Bond and Tiffany Case are being chased around Las Vegas. And they're driving through Fremont Street, and then they're driving through a parking lot. And then the cops chase him into this dead end, and somehow he's able to get the car on its side and go through this like crevice in the dead end. And I'm like, this movie is becoming too much. This movie is almost laughable and how stupid it is. There's like so many stupid sequences in this movie that it's beyond crazy. But the essence of what this third act ends up becoming is it's about James Bond figuring out that these diamonds are being used for a satellite. There's a lot of satellites in James Bond movies. This is very similar to GoldenEye, where the satellite is basically being used to destroy weapons of mass destruction, like Chinese weapons or a nuclear submarine, or it blows up a base in I think Arizona or Arkansas or something like that. One of those small bases. And it's basically about the total destruction of the Earth again. It's another Blofeld trying to destroy the world, but he's using diamonds to basically create a heat ray to do this. And it's kind of an interesting idea, but it's just so over the top and overzealous. Charles Gray as Blofeld is just way too much and way too weird and way too offbeat. And the fact that he has these two goons named Kid and Wint who have this weird like buddy romance, and they're just how they act and how they go about things. It leads up into this really weird sequence at the very end. But as everything plays forward, they actually, because Blofeld's been like faking himself as White with this like electronic voice box, they actually find the real White. And this is another really weird sequence because James Bond walks into this house and there's these two females, very attractive females called Thumper and Bambi. And they know kind of martial arts and stuff like that. They're doing flips everywhere. And it's a very weird sequence of them using like the Xena on the top legs and trying to kill him and stuff like that, and he ends up like drowning them and stuff like that, or trying to drown him so he can get the information on where Willard White is. And they finally rescue Willard White, and it's Jimmy Dean. Jimmy Dean Sausage, that guy, the guy who created Jimmy Dean Sausage, is Willard White, one of the main characters in this movie, who has an important part to what is going on. And I have no problems with Jimmy Dean in this, but this had to be one of those things where it was kind of a favor, maybe by the Broccoli family or Guy Hamilton or something. But he's not good in the movie. He's actually pretty terrible, and it's just over the top. There's a point where they're up in White's penthouse, which was being used by Blofeld, and they're trying to figure out where Blofeld has basically located himself. And James Bond's going through the different spots where you can see like the different structures in this floor model. And he goes to a point where it's Baja California or something like that, and it's an oil rig. And Jimmy Dean's Willard White is like, I don't have an oil rig, so that's where Blofeld is. And Blofeld has this like amazing oil rig that has like, you know, all these mechanical contraptions and stuff like that that can, you know, operate the satellite. And they're using a cassette tape, which was actually kind of revolutionary for the time, a cassette tape to kind of control the, you know, where the satellite can go and so on and so forth. But it just leads to this another action sequence that's just kind of boring. Doesn't really, it's not really effective. There's a lot of points where it just kind of stalemated and standstill. You know, James Bond is basically thrown out of a plane into like this big blow up ball that he like moves forward to the oil rig, and he gets like captured. And like, you know, Tiffany Case is just mentally challenged in this movie, or it's really stupid. I don't know what, but she's just not very smart in what she's doing. She's like in a bikini and she's like sunbathing herself, and it's just like this movie is just weird. And like also, you know, as things happen, Blofeld is defeated and James Bond wins, and he gets the girl. And at the very end, Tiffany and James are on a cruise, and Went and Kid show up. And, and I swear to God, there's this cake that has a bomb in it that I think it was Went sets or something like that. And they all of a sudden, just James Bond recognizes a clone. I don't know how he recognizes it because he's never really been around these guys as in consciousness form. And they basically strangle him. One of the guys strangles him, and the other guy takes these shish kebabs and lights them on fire and is slowly moving towards James Bond to stab him. And James Bond, of course, finds a way to escape, and he uses lighter fluid, and the guy just like catches on fire and he falls off the side of the boat. And then the guy like then the other guy goes after James Bond, and he grabs his arm, throws like goes between his legs and cracks his nuts, and then he attaches the bomb somehow and throws him over, and it's just this amazing explosion experiment. But it's just like this movie is just weird and just. But I know a lot of people complain about On Her Majesty's Secret Service and how they think that movie's just like really off kilter from what James Bond is known for. But when you bring in this movie, you bring Sean Connery back and you use him in the potential of, you know, his last film, and then you do this weird nonsense that is Diamonds Are Forever, and you have it in Las Vegas, which could be really cool. I really feel like all the people in this movie could have had something so much better. I think it was a problem with Tom Mankiewicz. Maybe he just didn't know what he was writing or how to give this movie kind of a good feel or good character arcs. I don't know. But it's a real terrible note for, you know, Sean Connery to go out on. You know, he went on such a great note with You Only Live Twice, that this movie with his campy feel and his cheesiness, it just doesn't help his status as James Bond. And on top of that, you know, James Bond looks way older than he did. I mean, this is like 4 years after You Only Live Twice, and he looks just way older than he did in that movie. And this is almost like a continuation of that movie with James Bond literally going after people to find out where he's at. But I don't know. I feel like this movie just was a huge miss in the James Bond franchise, and I just think it doesn't work. And it's such a shame because Guy Hamilton really knocked it out of the park with one of the great villains in the movie of the James Bond franchise with Goldfinger. And this one just Blofeld, you know, I think after what Telly Savalas did, I just don't think it works. And of course, they brought back Shirley Bassey to actually do this, you know, the theme song for this. She had a really great theme with the Goldfinger, and Diamonds Are Forever is actually a pretty decent theme. They brought back, of course, John Barry, who's been the kind of staple for this franchise as a composer, and it works. You know, he does a really nice soundtrack. It really fits the movie, but the movie is just something else. It's such a shame. Of course, we're getting Roger Moore for the next few years after this and several other Bond films. But yeah, it's such a shame. I really don't have any more else to say on it. I just don't think it's a lot of fun or very exciting. It's kind of boring, actually. This is the end for Sean Connery. Sean Connery is one of those people, one of those actors that really set the tone for James Bond. His suaveness, his debonair, his uniqueness for, you know, of course he was Scottish, not British. And he just had a way about him that just really kind of felt unique and kind of just set the mood for who James Bond was. But this movie didn't help him at all. It really kind of set his legacy in kind of a weird motion. And I think the fact that he did another movie that was not in the official canon was kind of a slap in the face to his legacy and to the franchise itself. But he did what he did. He made a movie that wasn't very good, and it was actually a remake of Thunderball, so it just doesn't make any sense. But you know what? I still, you know, salute Sean Connery for doing this role. I think he's still a fantastic James Bond. and he will, be forever known as the first James Bond. So yeah, that's it. That's Sean Connery's foray into the James Bond universe. Like I said, he set the bar, and we're heading to Roger Moore's era, which is a pretty interesting, very cheesy and over the top era, but produced some great movies, some great music, and a different version of Bond. So there we go. That's my take on Diamonds Are Forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next, and comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. But otherwise, we'll see you on Live and Let Die. Peace out. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking out Movie Emporium. I really appreciate it. If you want to, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button and the bell at the top. Find out what's coming next for Movie Emporium. Also, check out these 2 videos. They're amazing. I think they're awesome. I think you'll enjoy them too. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.